This is my second try trying to stream this video. The last time it looked like I had sound issues. It was audible, but it wasn't very clear. So hopefully this one will be better. You may have noticed also that I have rebranded my YouTube channel. I wanted to focus more on personal perspectives on things as opposed to political kinds of orientation, even though I still hold those views in terms of the liberty agenda and constitutional government and so on. I want to focus more on how we can find ways to bring people together, possibly, or at least bring the country back on ways that we can bring the country back on a more even footing. It's been about 5 months since the presidential election, and we've seen a tremendous amount of turmoil during this 5 months. When Trump took office, there was some optimism that he would be able to overcome this sort of political outrage over the fact that he had won the election, and maybe bring a little more unity at some point in time. I don't think we've exactly seen that. We have seen some movement in that direction. There certainly are a number of people on the sort of middle left part of the spectrum that are trying to understand what's going on and possibly be a little more reasonable or rational about what they're doing, give some more thought to what they're doing. One sign of that was Dianne Feinstein actually going along with an investigation of, I think it was Comey or Lynch, one or the other, and looking at some of these things that have been patently wrong and illegal and really immoral kinds of things going on. In the past 5 months, I haven't really been on the air much for the past 3 months. I spent some time on some of the Roswell UFO stuff and the whole concept of these extraterrestrial kinds of questions. And I will go into that more at a later date, but I think it was worth doing some research on this and reading some of the more rational, more fact-based materials that have been published, some of the books, specifically Richard Dolan and Timothy Good. But that's not the focus of this particular video. I really want to talk about the fact that we have entered a period here of radical uncertainty and probably even more uncertainty, if that's possible, than we had 5 months ago. The political, economic, and social situation that we're in is just kind of been amped up to a degree that is not even close to what I've seen in my lifetime. We look at the political situation right from the inauguration on. There has been an all-out effort to undermine and even eventually impeach this president. There has been political shootings. We had the members of Congress attacked. Representative Scalise, who is the Republican whip, was seriously injured and could have easily died, and we didn't know for sure if he would die for a while. Hopefully he will recover, but the man that was there was definitely armed to kill many more people, and it was just fortunate that the Secret Service were there, or the Washington, D.C. police, I think, were there, the Capitol Police, and we avoided really a mass murder situation there. We've also seen things that are suspicious, to say the least, with people being basically murdered or, political killing of one kind or another, it would appear. Although we can't prove these things, we may never be able to prove whether Seth Rich was murdered by, supporters of the DNC or some faction. We may never be able to prove that certain people have been killed from the Clinton faction, the Clinton organization, but nonetheless, it's not beyond reason to think that such things could happen. Looking at history and looking at the way people can be vicious in trying to maintain their power. On the economic front, we've seen more and more concern about a financial meltdown of some kind, an economic recession or depression, major concern about the national debt, about global financial stability and currency stability. So again, it's hard to see how we have a way out of it, but it's still possible that we'll find some way to limp along here for a few years. But it's certainly not beyond, it's not unreasonable or beyond the pale to think that we could see an economic meltdown, something even worse than we saw 7 or 8 years ago, or 9 years ago now, in 2008, when we saw the real estate market bubble and collapse, and we saw major financial institutions collapse too, and we saw major government pumping of money into the economy, pumping money into certain organizations to try and save them and try and save the financial system. So we came extremely close, and in fact, it's arguable whether we ever really did recover from that to this point, where we have 95 million people out of the labor pool, and we have a increasingly tenuous economy here in the United States, and of course in the West in general. We've seen very tenuous economic circumstances. So we don't know what's going to come of that. The social situation is sort of in a turmoil at this point. There's a combination of kind of trying to understand what has happened. I think a lot of people have begun to question the legitimacy of the current government, and not our form of government, but definitely the elites that rule in the financial, political, and institutional order. And there's certainly a lot of us that feel that there are major problems with corruption and compromise in these areas. Just for example, the media has been basically repudiated for blatant kinds of manipulation of the news, lies, flagrant partisan political activities, and so on. So all of this is really making us wonder what will happen in the coming months or in the coming years. And it seems like that a major disruption of any kind could completely sort of tip the balance here. In international affairs, we see problems continuing in the Middle East, unresolvable problems. We have now, threats of chemical war in Syria. We have, a building war between, the Iranians, the alliance with the Russians that the Iranians have, the potential threat of nuclear kind of weaponry that the Iranians may develop at some point if they don't have them already. And then you have the issue in Syria with terrorists or terrorist sympathizers and fighting against the Syrian government. And then you have the United States somehow in the middle, trying to fight both ends, both the terrorists and the Syrian government. And so it's a complete mess. We have the United States sending tremendous amount of armaments to Saudi Arabia, who is a sworn enemy of Iran. And you have Saudi Arabia backing, at least implicitly, some of its citizenry anyway, backing the ISIS fighters. You certainly have a brutal and sort of archaic society in Saudi Arabia that is alien to anything that we have grown to know in Western civilization. And then you have Yemen, and you have the terrorist kind of enclaves in Yemen, as well as Afghanistan. We also have issues in North Korea. We have Japan concerning itself with possible nuclear exchange of some kind, trying to prepare its population for that possibility, as unthinkable as it may be. You have an armada of American warships, American technology into that region. both for North Korea as well as to try and counter some of the aggressive things that China has been doing. So we have that as well. The financial system is going in such a way, at least from the United States point of view, is bad because the dollar as the reserve currency of the world has been eroded and will continue to erode, and most experts believe that the dollar will not be the reserve currency of the world in the future, and it may not be far off. So we will see continuing probably devaluation of the dollar, although we don't know for sure when that will commence. It may not happen for a while, but so many of these things, they can change quickly. In any one of these areas, we can see major changes almost overnight, and there's a very good potential for a kind of a cascading effect. One thing, can affect others. So you have, war could affect economies, the financial system could affect political realities and social realities. So these are all serious concerns that we have. Just to kind of go through some of the news, go through the some of the websites here. Let me just get this up here. So here's the one on Fox News that just came out a few minutes ago. Syria could be planning a chemical attack, the White House says. There was an accusation of a chemical attack not too long ago. Some people thought it was contrived, but who knows? We don't really get a lot of good information about this stuff. We only know what we're told, and probably only told what they want us to believe. So the reliability of what we hear is questionable at best. Another major issue that we have, although there's a lot of skepticism, not just on a few, but on the part of a lot of us about all of these reports, and so in a sense that's a good thing too. Here we have from the Independent in England, Great Recession fears as bankers warn next global crash could arrive with a vengeance. And I think that's something that, as I alluded to before, I see reports like this all the time. It's not to say that I'm a financial expert and I know these things well enough, but I have enough, I've lived enough life to see that these things, kind of the trends, I know that the currencies are manipulated both from the United States point of view as well as China and around the world. So my guess is most of the world resents the fact that the United States has been able to opportunistically game the system in a way with not only our hegemony throughout the world, but the way we've manipulated our own currency with quantitative easing and things like this. So my guess is that we will see, and if there is a recession, depression kinds of thing here, it will affect the whole world. So it's really hard to see how we have a soft landing, but it's possible that even though we're resented in the United States by a lot of other countries for not unreasonable cause, they may not want to see us completely implode either. Here we have Japan, this report from the Sun in England again. Japan on nuke alert. Japan issues warning over North Korea nuclear missile strike, with residents told to seek shelter or to lie on ground in terrifying TV broadcast. Again, some of this is sensationalistic news, but at the same time, it's not without some foundation. There's been reports for many years about this sort of insane leader of North Korea and his continued attempts and actual accomplishment of not only nuclear weapons but missile technology as well. Here we have a report from Bloomberg about missile threats surging worldwide. So apparently, we see threats of nuclear, or not nuclear, but missile attacks. Here we see the Seattle hiked its minimum wage, and there's a report about how that has really had a negative effect on the retail part of the economy, and that's going to affect our economy as a whole. If small towns and retail businesses are crushed, which they are continuing to be with the ascendance of Amazon and just the general shift towards the Walmarts and Costco's and so on, these big, you know, large warehouse type of shopping, it's almost impossible for small businesses to thrive, let alone or even possibly survive in the future. So you're going to have a big gap in the whole social fabric where there is no stepping stone for people can start out, kids especially, but even others who don't have any other training, not being able to develop a work pattern and a work history and be able to work their way up the economic ladder. Here we have, I can't remember the person's name now, Gerald Celente, I believe it is, who publishes Trends Research. He's actually a very notable analyst on economic affairs and as well as politics. He's been around a long time. He's saying that there's a wake-up call confronting the abuse of power. It goes on and talks about how we've been on this path with you know, corruption and abuse by political leaders as well as financial and multinational interests, military forces, and so on. So that's an article probably worth reading to at least get your finger on the pulse of what people are thinking. Here we have you know, CNN again, one of many articles that have come out repudiating and proving that CNN has been completely partisan and had a clear agenda, political agenda, in how it has behaved. And this hasn't really just been true in the last year, although it's been completely blatant and obvious in the last year. This has really been going on for decades, and I think people are starting to realize and wake up. This is another kind of factor in the social situation where people are questioning, you know, what's going on in our universities, what's going on in our media, what's going on in, you know, some of these institutions that we have basically given a pass on so many things over the years. And people are starting to realize they have agendas, they're self-serving, and they're not honest. And, you know, we don't know all of the details, but we know enough that we're starting to realize that this is an issue. And then here, lastly, there's a today you had the Supreme Court overturning a absolutely ridiculous partisan leftist kind of Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I guess that's about all I have right now. I just thought I would kind of bring us up to date with where we are. I think the presidential election we've gone through a very severe kind of testing of how we would be able to sort of recover from this situation. And with people trying to impeach Trump, a lot of establishment, we call, you know, people that are in the you know, old order, I guess I'll call it, both on the Republican side as well as Democrats, trying to undermine, trying to really not acting in a sincere manner, not acting in a way that's even consistent with what they claim to believe. I think the health care bill is a good example where they were talking about, you know, repealing the Obama health care plan, the so-called Affordable Care Act, which is unraveled completely. In fact, we just lost our insurance carrier, the only one left in Oregon. Today we got a letter about this. So once the government gets total control of health care, the idea of a market economy is kind of gone. And we have so many people that have left the workforce. We have so many people that are dependent on the state in one way or another, on the federal or the state governments. We have state governments that are essentially insolvent, Illinois being one. And if we have a major downturn, there's no doubt we'll have many other states that are going to become essentially broke or insolvent, and there won't be anybody to bail them out. So I don't know if if all of these things will actually happen, but certainly not beyond reason to think that any one of these areas could cascade into a major societal, you know, not really an implosion, but a dislocation of the existing order, financial, social, and even political. So as we move forward, it will be interesting to see where we end up. We'll see if we can navigate this. I think that right now President Trump is trying to do the right things. He has so far been able to fend off these attacks on him, and I see some of the sort of counters to what he has done, what have been trying to be attack him on so many things. And we see Loretta Lynch now starting to be investigated. My conviction was equivalent of that. So many of the Obama administration were just awful, and it is interesting to see that there's something like a civil war being played out in the political arena, and it is having an effect because of the rhetoric and the propaganda that's going out, not only in the media but through all the various front groups and so on. And so we're in a very uncertain time, but hopefully it isn't without some hope that we will be able to somehow navigate our way through this, and hopefully some of the things that we are told and some of the impressions that I have will not prove to be as serious as I think they are. But right now it is a extremely serious situation, I think, for not only the United States but for the world. So that'll be it for now, and hopefully this one will come out better than the last one. And I will disconnect this in 1, 2, and 3.